The one place that intrigued me was my first trip to London and the House of Parliament in Big Ben. Now, these pictures, you must remember, are more than a quarter of a century old. Now, the thing that amused and entertained our boys who were stationed all over England was Westminster Abbey. And there were quite a few Americans who came there to see the sights and see Westminster Abbey. And these are the scenes that I wanted to photograph on one Sunday afternoon. Another area that intrigued me was Marble Arch. The Marble Arch on one Sunday afternoon was full of people. You must remember that London was being bombed almost every night in this particular time. And I was photographing these speakers that were addressing the crowds. Every speaker was speaking on a different subject, but the police stood around and watched, and as long as there were no arguments, any strong arguments, nobody was hurt. And the people in the audience were arguing back with the speakers. But these were just typical shots of how we passed the time waiting for D-Day. Most of the children who lived in England, or a great many, I should say, were sent out of the city. But a lot of them had to remain behind. But in spite of a war, they managed to find entertainment. I was rather surprised to see these children drinking out of community drinking cups that were changed to the fountain. And I'd like to make candid shots of these children so they didn't notice me, but every once in a while they did. But this youngster is taking a cool drink on a beautiful Sunday afternoon. And we discovered that the St. Paul's Cathedral had been hit several times, but not badly damaged. And of course, one of the other attractions was Buckingham Palace and the gates, which were protected by British troops, not in the bearskin hats which they wore in peacetime, but in full war uniform. And this is the way they paraded up and down. They weren't performing for the camera, but they were actually doing their duty. But you notice the barrage balloons in the background. London had barrage balloons all over the area. And it was said that if it wasn't for the barrage balloons, with all the equipment that was being brought into the country, that the islands would sink into the sea, but the barrage balloons, they said, was holding it up. You must remember, too, that food was pretty scarce in London at this time, and it was being brought in whatever way they could and being unloaded. But it isn't often you get a bright day like this in the spring in London, and this was an opportunity to show what the soldiers were doing while they were waiting for the invasion. This is Fleet Street. Discovered this Irish policeman guarding the street, and we saw considerable damage in the area. But soon, we were down on the south coast of England, where we met some of the other correspondents who were scheduled to cross the channel with us. And you'll probably recognize some of the old-timers who covered the war in that particular time. I was given a shovel to defend myself, and it proved to be a valuable instrument. And here we see Larry LeSueur of CBS. Larry LeSueur was covering the war for CBS, and so was Wertenbecker on the left, Jack Thompson of the Chicago Tribune, Ernie Pyle here, and this is a close-up of Jack Thompson, and this is O'Reilly, Larry O'Reilly of the Associated Press. This is Wertenbecker, and we're saying our farewells because we were expected to meet again in Paris. Here on the left we see Clark Lee of INS and Bill Stoneman, who came from Chicago, from the Daily News, and several other of the correspondents were being aboard a military truck to be taken to the south coast. And we went through small British towns, and life was going on as usual. The people were in the marketplace buying food, and as though nothing was going on. But after a 150-mile ride, that's how we felt riding in an Army vehicle. We found Plymouth was pretty badly damaged. A lot of the buildings were completely destroyed, but this was found all over the area. Soon we were approaching the dock area, and we found these American jeeps ready to be boarded aboard landing craft, and you notice the bars that are attached to their bumpers. And they're designed to cut wires that the Germans had a habit of putting across the road that would sometimes cut off the head of the drivers. We weren't allowed to wander around the area by ourselves. Each crossroad point was under guard of both an American and a British soldier. And if they wanted to see what you had in your bedroll, you had to show it to them. But this is the care that was taken that the secret of the invasion be kept as long as it could. These are the two men, Wes Carroll of the OWI and Pete Carroll and Wes Haynes, rather, who were with me, and we went aboard an LCI number 5. Pete Carroll here came from Boston, and he was a photographer for the Associated Press. And we tried to keep our mind off what was coming, and we knew it was going to be a short time before we would be on board. We had our first taste of K-rations, which didn't taste bad if you were hungry. And we also were able to see the beautiful countryside in that area. And these are the sort of shots I wanted to bring home to show my family and friends. Pete Carroll was using some of his film to make a few shots himself. And soon we were down at the docks. And there we found units of the 101st Airborne Division carrying everything they could carry by hand, boarding landing craft that were so heavily laden they had to be pushed off the docks by trucks, as you see in this manner. And these men were being taken out to larger craft and boarded for the invasion. And here we see several units carrying grenades, bazookas. They didn't have an opportunity to load this aboard jeeps that were not fully available at this particular moment. We were aboard a fleet of LCIs, and here shown with the commander of the invasion group in the center, and the captain on the right, rather the captain of our ship, Lieutenant Patton, was in command of the LCI number 5, and we found out that he participated in several invasions in the Mediterranean area. And we felt rather confident that he knew what he was doing. But we stayed aboard this ship for almost 5 days. This is the commander of the squadron. I remember Lieutenant Patton's name well because we were with him for so long. Wes Haynes was trying to get ready for the trip into Paris. I think he was premature. And these are units of the 101st Airborne Division aboard our landing craft, amusing themselves. And I don't have to tell you who this man is imitating. He was a Notre Dame football player at one time, and I was told later on that he was killed in the action. Of course, every ship had a mascot, and ours was no different, but the boys provided for their mascot's welfare with the making of a life preserver, just like the ones that they wore themselves. And then one afternoon, Lieutenant Patton briefed the crew and told them that we would be sailing that afternoon. And they let out a cheer because this is the job they were waiting for. They wanted to get it done and go home. And here we see the LCI number 4 with the commander